All right, our top story is about U.S. Secretary of State embarking on a trip to Saudi Arabia.
Right. Antony Blinken is set to embark on a 3-day visit to Saudi Arabia. He has called for the normalization of ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Blinken is expected to arrive this evening in Jeddah.
Now, in the next 2 days, he will be in Riyadh for a ministerial meeting of the Gulf Cooperation Council members of the 80-strong coalition of countries fighting the Islamic State. They will also meet in Blinken's presence. Besides his diplomatic counterparts, Blinken is expected to meet with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Washington has stepped up its push for normalization of Saudi-Israel ties in the wake of the successes of the Abraham Accords. The initiative was launched by former President Donald Trump to persuade Arab countries to recognize the Jewish state.
The United States has a real national security interest in promoting normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. We believe that we can, and indeed we must, play an integral role in advancing it. Now, we have no illusions that this can be done quickly or easily, but we remain committed to working toward that outcome, including on the trip I'm about to take this week to Jeddah and Riyadh for engagements with our Saudi and Gulf counterparts.
Although Israel and Saudi Arabia have long maintained regular contact at the unofficial level, Riyadh has declined to recognize Israel. Secretary of State Antony Blinken pledged continued U.S. commitment to both Israel's security and a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. He nonetheless added that the expansion of Jewish settlements would be an obstacle to peace.
Despite long-standing close ties, U.S. relations with the Saudis have been testy in recent years. The two have been at loggerheads over the murder of dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi and Riyadh's efforts to raise oil prices after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In addition, the Saudis recently gave China an opening into the West Asian political dynamics, with Beijing brokering a rapprochement between Riyadh and its arch-rival Tehran. And just last month, Prince Mohammed hosted Syria's President Bashar al-Assad in Jeddah. Washington rejects the legitimacy of his government in Syria. Saudi is also reportedly joining Iran's regional naval alliance. US is surely not pleased by these acts of Saudi Arabia.
And for more on this, we're now joined by U.S. Colonel David Bederosh. He is now a professor in a Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining us on this show, sir.
Thank you.
So my first question to you, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, of course, as I mentioned, is on a visit to Saudi Arabia. It's pushed for normalization of ties between Saudi and Israel. So what's your assessment of the United States playing the role of a mediator here, especially in light of the successes of the Abraham Accords?
Yeah, I think that the United States has always wanted to see peace between Israel and all of the regional countries. That's a long-standing ambition. Now that there's actually a better roadway to it, since the UAE and Bahrain, two of the closest countries to Saudi Arabia, have joined, theoretically, the possibilities are good. But I think at this point, it's still an American ambition. I don't think Saudi Arabia is ready to do it, and I don't think they're ready to do it under this administration and under the terms that were made available to the other Abraham Accord countries.
Sir, let's talk about United States relations with the West Asia. Now, particularly Saudi Arabia, the relations between the two countries have had their own share of issues. There's been China. We saw how MBS rolled out the red carpet for Xi Jinping. Then there is legitimacy to the Syrian government. And then there is a snub that Saudi Arabia gave to the appeals over oil, the U.S. appeals over oil. So is this also an effort by the Biden administration to regain influence in the West Asian region, and how successful will that be in your assessment?
Well, all of our engagements are trying to enhance Americans' image and our positions, advance our positions with our partners, regardless of who that may be. A lot of the so-called reports of so-called degradation of relations with Saudi Arabia are a little bit overblown. Like, for example, the reports of an Iranian-led naval coalition that came out of a country that has not gotten along well with Saudi Arabia. The Saudis haven't said they're part of it. I think that Blinken's reception will be cordial. I think people will listen to him. But for the Saudis to take a step of this magnitude, they're going to ask for some big stuff, and it would be hard for Blinken to agree with that on his own. This is something that I think there would have to be a lot of discussion and negotiations over a pretty prolonged period of time. The Saudi price is not going to be the same as the Bahraini price or the UAE price to join the Abraham Accords.
All right, we'll wait and see what are the outcomes of that meeting. But for the moment, Colonel David B. DeRoche, thanks very much for joining us with your perspective on this story.
It's an honor. Thanks.